The time is exactly 8:47, and we cross over to the Western Cape. She doesn't reside there. She's probably there on a workshop or on holiday, not quite sure what it is. But Ayesha Kajee, Research Fellow at Africa Asia Dialogues, is here to talk to us about Sudan having to recall the ambassador to Ethiopia after alleged execution of 7 soldiers. So, how is that going to play out, and what are the implications of that recalling of the ambassador? Assalamu alaikum to you, Aisha. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me, Julie. The fact that Sudan has recalled its ambassador from Ethiopia is quite a serious diplomatic incident. Sudan is claiming that 7 of its soldiers, as well as a civilian, were captured in Sudanese territory and executed by the Ethiopian army, by Ethiopian soldiers. Um, these soldiers were captured, according to Sudan, or allegedly, on the 22nd of June. And after executing them, again, the Sudanese government alleges that they were publicly displayed, which is, of course, in contravention of international law, even war, the laws governing war. So this is obviously a serious incident. On the other hand of the equation, the other side of the equation, Ethiopia issued a statement yesterday saying that the facts had been misrepresented. That is the word they used, that the killing of the soldiers was the result of a military skirmish at the border between Ethiopia and Sudan. You will know that Ethiopia and Sudan share a border at the northeast of Ethiopia, the northwest of Ethiopia and the east of Sudan, sorry. And this is an area that has been subject to conflict within Ethiopia regarding the Tigrayan people's struggle for independence or self-determination in Ethiopia. So there's been an influx of Ethiopian refugees over the past few years from Ethiopia into Eastern Sudan. That's also been a diplomatic issue between the two countries. And now Ethiopia is claiming that the alleged execution by Sudan of Sudanese soldiers in Ethiopian territory was the result of a military skirmish. They're saying these soldiers actually crossed over into Ethiopia, which has happened in the past, and there have been skirmishes with Ethiopian farmers. So both are possible incidents. Both scenarios are possible scenarios. The truth is not yet known. But the fact that Sudan has recalled its ambassador and is summoning the Ethiopian ambassador to Sudan as well for an explanation is, as I said, a serious diplomatic incident. It could lead to more conflict in the Horn of Africa. It has repercussions for trans-governmental organizations such as the African Union and the United Nations, because Sudan has also said that it's taking this issue to the UN. So it's a wait-and-see situation right now. There is no proof of what actually happened, and there are two very different stories being told by Sudan and Ethiopia, respectively.
So clearly, if the Sudanese government want to take this up to the UN, they probably have evidence if they're making those type of threats, unless it is just that it's just threats. You do say that there are serious repercussions that would come out of this. How can this be repaired? To prevent further repercussions. And this has been a conflict that has been long in the making, and there still doesn't seem any resolution to it. What is it going to take to resolve this matter? I know it's a very simplistic question. Uh, but the implications are so very serious, and this is just one of the many countries north of our borders that have these long ongoing conflicts that just can't seem to find resolution.
Yes, well, I think in terms of the relations between Ethiopia and Sudan, what this calls for is some form of independent mediation, fairly high level mediation. So I would say at the head of state level or foreign minister level at the very least. Possibly the best way to resolve this would be within Africa. So for another African country to be appointed by the East African Community, which is the regional body, or by the African Union to actually act as a good faith mediator between the two countries. That would be one option, and possibly the easiest and most simple diplomatic option. Another option would be for the UN to step in. There are some murmurings that there's a possibility that China might step in as a mediator. That has not been confirmed yet. But as I said, my viewpoint would be that it is best solved within Africa, or
Okay.
resolved within Africa.
Well, let's hope and pray, inshallah, that this does get resolved sooner rather than later. I mean, wherever we look, as I've said, north of our borders, there seems to be some form of conflict or the other. And in the rest of the world, if it's not genocide of some form or the other, then it's disputes over territory. And all I say is, has this world gone mad?
Well, given that both Ethiopia and Sudan have internal conflict as well, I do think this is a pretty serious situation in the sense that neither country can afford to have a major diplomatic falling off of relations. Also, impacting on this issue, though not directly related to it, is a long-standing dispute between the two countries over the huge dam that Ethiopia has constructed on the Nile. And so, there are sort of, in inverted commas, water wars, if you will, between the two countries. And, there are predictions by analysts internationally that water is going to be the thing that is most frequently fought over in the next few decades, far more than oil or gold or any other resource. Water is going to become that scarce and precious resource that countries actually go to war over. So it is really a sincere hope that Ethiopia and Sudan can actually mediate this and find some resolution, because, as I said, both of them have enough problems within their own countries. Sudan with the former, what was formerly part of Sudan and is now South Sudan. There are still tensions between those two countries. And in Ethiopia, as I said, huge, literally a civil war going on right now due to the Tigrayan conflict, and implications, of course, from that for Ethiopia's relationship, not only with Sudan, but with other neighbors, such as Eritrea, which was at one stage a huge point of conflict for Ethiopia. So we don't want a resurgence of violence, interstate violence in this region, where there is also already intra-state violence. And therefore, we should all be hoping for a peaceful resolution to this.
Aisha, I did indicate at the beginning of the interview that I'm only allowing you 5 minutes because of time constraints. But when you start talking about the tensions in Africa, you can't help but stretch the interview because there's so much to cover. You spoke about the water war, so I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes more because it is an important issue. I spoke to Flux Trends a couple of years ago about this very issue, and Dion Chang at the time. Actually, shared the same sentiments as you are sharing now, that the future wars of the world is going to be about water reserves, no longer gold and no longer oil. Having said that, obviously you speak about these two countries, Sudan and Sudan and Ethiopia. Egypt's going to be involved in that fray as well, in a very, very big way. Talk to us about that very quickly.
Yes, well, we have to bear in mind that the Nile waterway is one of the largest waterways in the world and the largest waterway in Africa, that literally hundreds of thousands, if not several millions of people, if one, extrapolates that beyond the immediate environs of the river, literally millions of people depend on the Nile for their livelihoods, for their water source, their water resource, that several countries depend on the Nile Delta for their agricultural resource in terms of feeding the countries, the nation's people. And one of those countries, of course, is Ethiopia, where Nile agriculture is central to the agroeconomy of the country and the greater food security of the country, the food and water security of the country. So, of course, there's been a dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia about the construction of the GERD, this huge hydroelectric power dam on the Nile in Ethiopian territory. It's been a point of tension between Ethiopia and Egypt, as well as between Ethiopia and Sudan, as I mentioned earlier. And the other things that play into this is that the countries which are not directly on the Nile also benefit or are in negatively impacted by the construction of this dam. Now, Ethiopia's contention is that it has every right to harness the Nile waters for its own national benefit, if you will, for power as well as, of course, for water for agriculture. But what really happens downstream in both Sudan and Ethiopia is that the degree of water that reaches those countries as a result of this dam actually severely impacts the flow of the Nile and in Egypt particularly, the reach of the water during flooding season in the Nile Delta, and therefore negatively impacts both agriculture and water security, food security and water security in Egypt particularly, but also in Sudan. So again, this is an issue that's going to need further mediation. It's going to need more scientific study. It's going to need compromises on both parts in order to reach a solution where each party feels they've been equitably dealt with. But also, having said that, I think we must also not ignore that this is not the only river in Africa or the only water resource in Africa that's being fought over as a water resource. Similar things are happening in West Africa, in the central part of the country, and particularly in the Sahel region. Think of countries like Mali, Niger, etc. And it's a question that really needs to be unpacked at a far greater level of detail to show the impacts of water scarcity on each of these
Which,
countries, and it impacts
right.
each one in different ways.
And obviously, we're talking water wars here, but the direct impact is food security or food insecurity. That's where we
Mhm.
have to leave it. Thank you indeed for that overview. And always wonderful talking with you. Shukran so very much for your
Shukran
time.
jazilan.
Salaam alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's exactly 9 o'clock, time for us to join our news editor, and that is you, Zahid Jadwad, bringing us the news bulletin right here on Salam Media. The other interviews to allow for time